Welcome to Pure Dog Talk. I am your host, Laura Reeves. And you guys, I am so excited. I have been very patiently waiting for 2.5 years for this conversation to get to talk to Dr. Donald Sturz, who just judged Best in Show at Westminster Kennel Club. And I just really wanted to do this after the show because I just feel that's more appropriate. So welcome, Don. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here with you.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. So as with every judge that does Westminster Best in Show, lots and lots and lots of ink has been spilled about you and your background. We normally start these interviews with what we call the 411, but it's been done so many times, we're going to kind of slide past it.
Sure.
And we're going to do some big ticket items because I think you are one of the I think of you as the philosophers in our sport. And so we're going to do some philosophy stuff. You ready?
Okay, sure.
Excellent. So one of the things that I talk about at Pure Dog Talk a lot is that purebred dogs are history and they are art. And that is something I saw you speak to in one of the interviews that I was reading as I was getting ready for this. So I'd like you to expand on that in your inimitable way.
Well, I think I'll take them in two separate parts. I mean, from a historical perspective, I think it's so important that we keep our focus on, what the history of particular breeds are, not just from the point of view of, the climate or where they came from, terrain that they worked on, or jobs that were bred to do, but also how the breed has evolved over time and understanding the difference between, the evolution of a breed versus the changing of a breed. I think those are two very different things. Mm-hmm. And so I think having a historical perspective, I was going to say as a judge, but also as a breeder, I think that informs your decisions. It informs your perception of the dogs that you're looking at when you put them in that historical context of both where they originated, what they were meant to do, and how they've evolved over time. The other side of it, when you talk about dogs as art, that really resonates with me because that's what it's like to me. Like when I go to a dog show, I look at dogs as I would look at art in a museum. And I love when something moves me. You know how when you look at a beautiful piece of art, whether it's a painting or a sculpture or whatever, and you just have a visceral emotional reaction. I love when that happens for me with a dog. And, as a judge, it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen as frequently as one might like. But when it does happen, it's kind of like the reinforcer. It's like, see, if I keep going enough.
It's like that jackpot at the bingo hall, man.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's how it is for me.
I always say that dogs are sort of like gambling, like you hit a jackpot just often enough.
Yes, exactly.
Get that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is so important, and maybe you can speak to this further, thinking of dogs as history in terms of what they represent in world history, their place in the history, what they speak to about the people and the times that they represent in physical nature. They are living history in our living rooms.
Correct. And I think that when you take it into consideration, the moments in time, the moments in history through which these breeds maintained and continued to exist, and what it often took those individuals who maintained those breeds or nurtured those breeds, what it took for them to do during different points in history and what was going on. I think, that goes to what we were just talking about. I think that informs your appreciation for what's standing in front of you. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, in our sport and in the world at large, people have gotten so caught up in immediate gratification and looking for the outcome rather than the process.
Yes.
I think it's important for us, especially in dogs, to kind of catch ourselves if we find ourselves in that kind of moment and kind of say, wait a minute, slow down, Skippy. There's a much bigger picture and a much longer story. And you need to keep reminding yourself of that.
Yeah. Back up the bus, man.
Yeah.
And I think this segues beautifully into my next thought process. You talked again about sort of a global perspective, that it's not just the words in the standard, it's the essence. So build on that a little bit.
Well, that kind of strikes a few things for me. Like when I think of global perspective, with regards to dogs, I think in terms of wanting to understand and appreciate breeds as they appear in lots of different places in the world. And I think that helps inform my eye as far as when I see a breed, in a particular place, I'm like, wow, that was a great combination of the breed here and the breed there. For example, someone just sent me a picture of a Springer Spaniel from Australia and wanting to know, how do I think the dog might fare here? And the first thing that struck me was just how amazingly beautiful and correct this dog was. And I had seen dogs of this type actually in Scandinavia, some years back. And the way my brain processed it was a bridging of the UK version of the Springer Spaniel and the American version of the Springer Spaniel. So these individuals in Australia, these individuals in Scandinavia somehow kind of melded the two together, and you got this particularly beautiful animal with regards to outline and proportion, head details. And I think to be able to appreciate that you can have that moment of appreciating that dog. Whereas if I didn't have the global perspective, I might be put off immediately by the fact that the dog had so much ticking. Here in the United States, we value those very clear white and black or liver markings, right, in a Springer. And I could see how some people might just see that first and only and not be able to move past it to appreciate the true beauty and quality of the dog and the value of that dog for breeding purposes.
Yes.
In a place where he's bringing something to the table that we don't really have in abundance. So I tend to think a global perspective on any breed is a good thing. Even if it's just to be able to say, the breed is going off in a weird direction there, to have the awareness of that, like a point on the line, a point on the continuum. I'm big on there being gray area, and I can allow for some stylistic differences on the continuum, but there's a point. There's a line where you go like, okay, well, then that's too much. That's too far. It's either too moderate or it's too extreme. And I have a little wiggle room on both sides of that. So that's how I would process kind of that global perspective piece. I think it really informs your eye and how you view a breed and how you can appreciate a breed.
You said a thing there, and now I'm going to go off on one of my famous little rabbit holes. You said a thing there about bringing qualities that we need in our breeds. And now we're thinking from a breeder perspective, not a judge perspective, that don't match our necessarily perfect vision. A wire hair pointer with a solid head and one tail spot and no body markings, and finding the value to incorporating other things that just don't meet that personal aesthetic that will then improve the quality of the breed overall.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm talking about, is being able to kind of see the forest for the trees and be able to, as a breeder, see how that dog can add to your journey as you pursue your vision of the breed. And I think also being able to think in a more long-term way, because when you do that sort of thing, I think the mistake, unfortunately, is people go like, oh, I'm going to breed to this dog from wherever, and I'm going to bring in these qualities. And then they have a litter and it's like, oh, I didn't get what I wanted. You're probably not going to get what you want. You have to keep working and building and choosing and selecting. And it's a longer term process when one tries to do something like that. Does it sometimes click? Yeah, it sometimes happens, but I think that's unusual. I think it's more the other, that you have to kind of make a commitment to, a few generations out at least to see what you were trying to get to.
And that is so, again, flows back to something you said earlier about instant gratification, We want all these little cookie cutter dogs. Like the only way we can say we're great breeders is if every single dog looks exactly the way the other one looks. And that's all on markings. That's not actually on structure, right? Oh, they're all marked the same, so I'm a great breeder. So I think speaking to that and ways in which we can reevaluate our breeding programs, recalculate in our head, talk to that long-term struggle that says, no, this one doesn't look exactly like that one, but I am adding this piece that I want to eventually get to this point.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the breed and it depends on the element, because I think in breeding, there are certain elements in specific breeds that are more or less difficult to get or hold on to, right? It's not the same formula in every breed. But I think you have to have an awareness of that. Like, some breeds people talk about, I'm going to value construction over head because I can fix a head easily. In other breeds, fixing a head is not so easy, depending on the detail.
Bull terriers, say, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the kind of thing that one has to be able to have that conversation and have that knowledge and have that awareness. I think just looking at your own dogs or your own vision or your own plan, I think that will get you in trouble.
Yes.
Long term. I think you have to always be looking at what's happening around you and what others are coming up with. And by saying that, I don't mean, just running and jumping and breeding to whatever the
breed to a ribbon. No.
Right. No, but I just think being aware and making an informed choice, an informed decision of like, what, that dog or that line or that breeder has something that I think might help move me forward in what I have as my vision with breeding.
Absolutely. Okay. So great ones. We all love to find a great one. You talked about it, that hair standing up on your arm. Mm-hmm. It's in the details. And you made a comment that I thought was really wise, that it's not he asked for it or it's this or it's that. It's the high quality and the high chrome. So expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think coming off of judging that.
Right. I figure it's perfect answer time for you.
Perfect example, because the dogs come in and my hair standing off my arms as I'm starting to talk. Okay, it really, really moved me. As each one came out, it was like, oh, like this is going to be challenging. I've watched some lineups where it's evident right out of the gate that there are a few true contenders. In this case, and I'm not blowing smoke, in this case, there were 7 true contenders. Mm-hmm. And it goes to what you were just talking about, is all of them possessed the details one might be looking for in their breed. Mm-hmm. And that takes judging to a different level. And I guess this is where that visceral reaction, it's not about the dog asking for it as much as it is the dog that is offering you the greatest sense of the essence of that breed. Like in that moment, there's something that grabs you and says, that is all that. And I mean, I could talk specifically about my choice for best in show is the Bloodhound, which I think was a surprise to many people for many different reasons. Like I've heard people say like, oh, they expected me to go for something more flashy and stylish and glamorous. I guess that harkens to my poodle days or something. And I had other people, have commented on, well, that was a dark horse. He came out of nowhere. There were some heavy hitters that people expected to be more of the contenders, and they were. But, I have to judge them on the day. And on the day, as I got through the individual examinations, they were all on an even par. And what I did next was I had the dogs come out and stand on their own. And I don't know if people know this of me, but it's not about the dog that comes out and nails the stack and has the ears and the tail. It's not about that. Although that's very cool and exciting when it happens, I can appreciate it and what goes into that. But it's more about, does the dog hold themselves, carry themselves, present themselves in the way that represents their breed? So I want them to step out there. I want to see how they stand on their own. I want to see how they place themselves. I want to see what they look like structurally on their own. But I also want to see that character, how they hold themselves. And so I will be honest and say that in my brain in that moment, I knew that was going to be my procedure. I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those moments people are going to like bang me for doing a freestand because I'm going to ask a bloodhound to go do that. But I'm like, you know what? This is what I'm looking for. And I want to see him be a bloodhound. Like when he does whatever he does, and I didn't know what he would do. But what was so beautiful was that his breeder owner handler just very calmly like stepped out there and guided him very deftly into a natural stance. And he just planted his 4 feet perfectly without any of the crossover thing or like, it was just boom, boom, boom. And then he just stood there and he literally stared at me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a really proud dog. This is a dog who's giving me a dog standing over a lot of ground, a dog of power and strength. And then I sent him around and his gait was just, I mean, flawless. It was talk about, powerful and covering ground and elasticity and, all of that and head and tail carriage. And it was perfection to me. And it was like in that moment, I'm getting goosebumps again.
I had goosebumps too.
It was like, there it is. It's like, that was it. And I think, being able to appreciate him, and I think everyone's been talking about, well, how he moved, but it was like, yes, that was fantastic. But on closer inspection, you also have to appreciate, like, he had this incredibly gorgeous head. It was large. It had the right length and width proportions. He had gorgeous eyes. He had just the right amount of folds and wrinkles without becoming grotesque looking. He had just the right amount of bone and substance without becoming overdone and cloddy. It was like every detail was like right there, right there on the edge and just perfection. And that was what grabbed me. I kind of got lost in that. Yeah.
Are you ready to take your breeding program to the next level? DNA testing identifies health risks, physical traits, and genetic diversity. Did you know that you can plan for coat color, type, and other traits in your puppies? That's where Embark comes in. Embark helps breeders select ideal breeding pairs to support healthy pedigrees and the lifelong care of dogs. Embark with us.
You had a really non-traditional lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, think about this. You English setter, bloodhound, Samoyed, Lakeland, Maltese, Frenchie, German Shepherd. Okay. Laura's Sammy, that's the number 1 dog all breeds. Okay, it's a German Shepherd. Okay. But I mean, such a combination of dark horses, the bloodhound, the English setter, a bit of a dark horse.
Yes.
The Maltese, like, where did that come from? Like, I didn't see that coming. So I think you had just such a really interesting combination of dogs to look at. And so I guess, my question was, what's the first thought in your head when you see him? You address that. But seriously, when you look at that, to me, one of the things it speaks to, and it reminds me of the year that you did the sporting group at the garden and you put up the Brittany, another dark horse, relatively unknown dog, relatively unknown handler. And there is such a pervasive gripe within our fancy about it's only the famous people, it's only the famous dogs. Talk to us about how we address that in the sport, how you think about that, give people light in our tunnel.
Okay. Well, I think starting with, say, the lineup and the diversity of that lineup, for me, that's like being a kid in a candy store because I get to experience so many different kinds of aspects and, to go from the more utilitarian aspect of, say, the first 3 dogs in line of the Shepherd, the Samoyed, and the Setter, which then took me to a place where I could get really into coat texture and expression, looking at the Lakeland and the Maltese. And then the Frenchie gave me that, such a unique head, body shape, all of those little bat shape, all this stuff. My brain was going ping, 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 ping all over the place. So that was really, really cool. I think with regards to, I think what you're getting at is the notion that when judges kind of like hold the line, right? Like they just kind of put up what is expected to happen.
Right.
I would like to believe that. I think the majority of judges are trying to do a good job. And I think that what sometimes can happen, and I hope I don't get myself in trouble for this or you, but I think what can happen is just it's human nature to want to tend towards the norm, to be accepted, to be part of the group, that kind of thing. And so it's human nature to kind of go with what others are doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's not. And I think it's having the awareness and the ability and also the fortitude, because that's part of it too, right? The confidence to make the decision you believe is the right decision on that day, regardless of whatever anybody else thinks. And I was told by a judge early on that his best piece of advice to me would be that I judge every dog show as if it was my last one, meaning it frees you up from all that other stuff that bangs around in our heads, right? Of who do we know, who do we like, who do we not like, where are the assignments coming from, all of that. It frees you up. And I've always approached judging with that mindset of if I never judge again, at least I'll know the last time I did what I wanted to do. And I did what I believed was correct. And that doesn't mean people have to agree with me. It just means I'm being honest about what I think. And I'm sure there's plenty of times I've done things that people stand there and go like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. But if they come up and talk to me afterwards, trust me, I can tell you exactly why I did what I did.
And so now this is a personal question, and I'm a baby dog judge. I'm just getting started in my career. And I worry that I am going to feed into my desire to not follow the crowd and go too far the other way.
Yeah, that's a danger.
What's my regulator on that?
I think it's self-awareness, just the fact that you're aware that you have a tendency to be a little rogue. That has to be part of your
Have
thing.
you met me?
So I think that to me would be the regulator, is one's self-awareness that you have a tendency towards that. Just as the other, if you have a tendency to be a follower, you have to be aware of that and kind of check yourself. And I'm like, okay, and this goes into, you have to reflect on what you do, anything you do in life, right? You want to take some time to reflect and think about the impact and is it moving you in the direction you want to go. But I think with judging, it's really important to reflect after each judging assignment on, what you did that you're like 100% sure of, and what you did that you're not sure, that you might have done it a different way for a different reason, and being aware of that, understanding that. That was something else I learned very, very early on from Michelle Billings, actually. She and I often ended up having conversations about the previous day's judging. Like if we were at the airport and, we were waiting for flights, and she would be very open about talking about a particular breed or particular class, whatever. And that was great for me as a young judge, because it's like, oh, here's this great icon who's sitting there saying to me, maybe I was a little too hard on, head in that breed, or, if I had to do it over, maybe I would have done this, that kind of, I'm like, that's so cool to be able to know that that's okay. Like, that's how you get better. That's how you learn, is to reflect and think and be aware of why you did what you did. And I think in that moment, you'll know, right? It was like, I did that because no one else has done it and I thought it would be great to do. And then you want to say like, well, that's okay. And that can be cool and it can be right. But you want to be sure that it's the latter rather than just being independent.
Well, and I mean, that is what goes through my mind. Like, am I doing this just to be contrary, or am I doing it because it's the right thing to do? And so that's where I question myself.
Yeah, but just that awareness will help you.
Okay, sorry. So that was another one of those little rabbit holes.
It's okay. I'm keeping up.
That's good.
Jump right
That's
down the
good.
hole
I
with
knew
you.
you would, man. I knew you'd stay on your toes. A few years back, you were voted to receive Judge of the Year honors. And that was incredibly emotional for you.
Yes.
I remember interviewing you at the time. Talk about really what that meant to you.
Yeah, goosebumps again.
Yeah, I know.
That was a very special moment. I think people know now because, as you said, so much ink has been spilt. So I think, people are more aware now of what my story is.
Right.
And, my story starts as a child in dog shows and, growing up, coming from a situation where I experienced very severe bullying in school, and then having this respite, this escape to this world where it was completely the opposite, where people were acknowledging me and welcoming me and supporting me. And so I was constantly back and forth between these two worlds. And so for a child, and when I look back on that, I'm like, thank God I had that. Like, I could have been so damaged. And I really do attribute the fact that I was able to navigate that, because I had the dog shows to escape to, or I had the dogs to escape to every day. Like, I woke up and did dogs, then I went to school, survived, and came home. It's what got me through the day. Is I'm going to go home and I'm going to go work with my dogs, And so it was just this intense part of my growing up. And I've always been very passionate about dogs and passionate about the sport, but I always felt in somewhat of a selfish way, it was just for me. Like, I wasn't looking for fame. I wasn't looking for any of that. It was just, I love doing it. I love the process. I love to win as much as anybody else does, but it's the leading up to the win that is really what floats my boat. Like when I was showing poodles, like, I loved the process of creating the picture. And it was great winning a best in show with that. But the hours and hours and hours that went into creating that picture of the dog who just won best in show was really where the joy was. That was where the passion was. And so getting to this point in time where, after judging for all this time, when I got nominated for that award, I honestly, and this is how distorted my perception can be at times, I honestly, at this stage of life, felt that I wasn't somebody who was that popular. I don't know why. I mean, people have been incredible around this whole Westminster experience. And maybe it's on me that maybe I need to connect more directly with people to get a better read on what they think of me or feel towards me. But I just didn't think I was that popular to have people vote for me for an award like that. And so I didn't prepare a speech, and I was I really was shocked because I just didn't think that was going to happen. And I think that's what happened in the moment, is all of that kind of welled up and overwhelmed me as I was giving my speech. And all I did was kind of just talk. I don't even remember half of what I said. I know I was blubbering, but yeah, it was just one of those incredible life moments that was so unexpected and just so appreciated and so valued. I mean, it doesn't get better than to be recognized by your peers. It just doesn't. And so to do something that means so much to me and have others think I do it well or I make a difference, that just totally overwhelmed me. Yeah, it meant a lot.
I know it did. I think of my own personal life story, very similar. And 4-H saved my life, sort of thing. I was the librarian's best friend. I was the only third grader in the world that knew the Dewey Decimal System by heart. Because I spent my recesses in the library with Mrs. Young. And that was my safe space.
Yeah.
And like you, dogs, for many of us, I think many of us in dogs find that dogs are our literal safe space. And the community that we create is our safe space.
Trupanion is revolutionizing medical insurance for pets by providing the best possible experience to our members. And it's not some space-age dream. It's happening now. We pay your veterinarian directly while you're checking out, and we're the only ones who can, which means you have decisions in seconds, and you don't have to wait for reimbursement. So unlike with other providers, you'll keep more money in your pocket. Ask your veterinarian if Trupanion can pay them directly, because there's pet insurance, and then there's Trupanion.
I'm going to spin this even a direction I didn't even have planned, but I'm going to go there. Your profession, you are a doctor, you are a psychologist.
Yeah,
and one of the things that I think in this sport have lost a little bit of is our safe space. And so can you give us out here in listener land some coping skills, some ways to make dog shows back to what they were for you and I, a safe space?
I think that that's something that, depends on individuals being able to choose situations that are safe. I think people sometimes go into things with not their eyes wide open. and may find themselves in situations that are toxic. And so I think that it's important to have, coming back to like just self-awareness of what you need, like what would be a safe space, what you need, what would make a safe space for you might not necessarily be exactly what a safe space would be for me. So I think you need to be aware of what that is, what would make you feel safe, what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel like you're welcomed. So I think it starts on that side of it with the individual. I think on the other side of it, like if we just take a dog show, for example, I think if clubs view the dog show as more of a community event rather than just putting on a dog show, where the effort and the time is put into creating an event that makes people feel welcomed, that fosters positivity and positive interactions. And when I say community, I don't mean just the dog show community, but the community that surrounds where the event is itself, because God knows we need more people interested, or at least more people who support it. And so I think that's something that would be, helpful in this kind of safe space concept, is for the events themselves to be put on with a mind or a thought in that direction of how do we make people feel comfortable here? How do we make them have a good time here today? I know with Westminster, the club members think a lot about that. Like they think a lot about the exhibitors and how to make it, a pleasant experience. Even just something as simple as the club members walking around and thanking people for coming. Is there anything you need? Is there anything we could do better? It's having those kind of conversations and taking that feedback and thinking in terms of the human aspect of all of this. I think that would help, to just kind of set the tone. When the atmosphere is devoid of that, like devoid of connection and positivity, the activity itself can get really intense. Anything with competition can get really intense, and people's emotions can run high. And so if you kind of proactively set a tone or an atmosphere that's more celebratory or festive, I think it helps balance that out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one I think is important is us, the longtime exhibitors, the backbone of the sport at this point. We've grown up in it. There's some of us out there that are more jaded, maybe than you and I.
Yeah.
How do we talk to them? How do we say, hey, is it really necessary to do or say that?
Yeah, I think that's a hard conversation.
And that's why I'm asking you, because you're a smart guy.
Yeah, I think that's a hard conversation, because what comes into play, there are certain individuals who, just out of respect, they've earned the right to say whatever they want to say. But I think if you have the relationship to be able to kind of direct the conversation at looking at what they said and how it fits in the context of things, like I think sometimes people get jaded and they get lost in the fog of yesteryear, like things were so much better. And I was like, okay, I was there. Those things, they were there too. Like people did awful things back then. There were good dogs and bad dogs, and there were dogs who won who were aberrant, and all of those things were happening back decades ago too. So I think that's part of the conversation, is maybe
reality check
on that, right? Reality check. Exactly. It's like, yeah, no, or the notion that a breed was so much better. And I was like, I don't know that it was, that kind of thing. I think those can be meaningful conversations if you have them with the right tone.
Right.
You don't want to confront people because that immediately makes people defensive. I think it's more inquiry, tell me more about that, and then say, well, you know what, that sounds just like this in our current day situation. Like you kind of navigate it that way, or at least that's how I handle it. Seems to go okay.
Well, and my listeners are amazing people. And a lot of the people I talk to on the podcast are new. They're just getting started. Yeah. And so I love being able to, like you describe, sitting around a setup, listening to Ann Clark and Michelle Billings and all the people of the day talk and incorporating their wisdom into your life. I love to be able to do that for my listeners vicariously by talking to smart people like you.
Oh, thanks. I think that that's a piece that is something that I think happened more naturally back in the day. I think that people hung around more. It was like you came to the dog show and you stayed for the groups. Whereas now people's lives are like, okay, I'm going to the dog show and then I'm going to the kids' soccer game and then I'm going to someone's, which one can make the argument, well, that's life balance and well-rounded, but it also then diminishes the value of the dog show day experience where you could find yourself in these conversations. If you're spending the day and you've got some hours where you're not actually preparing your dog or competing with your dog, to kind of go and watch and sit. And I think that's probably one of the things that people could do more of, is seeing the value in watching other breeds and having conversations with people from other breeds. I always found that incredibly enlightening. And
Yes.
and then the way my brain works as a judge is I tend to group dogs in families kind of thing. Like if I look at the sporting group and then we have the natural break, right, of pointers, setter, spaniels, on, and what that means, right? Like what are the features that go along with that family? And yes, the details change from breed to breed, but there are some commonalities that are, spaniel features. There's commonalities that are retriever features and so on. To be able to have those conversations with people in those other breeds so that you get a really strong grasp of what makes your golden retriever different from that Labrador retriever and different from that flat coat retriever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know that people can have those conversations as well. And for me as a judge, it's like essential, like I don't want to walk in and see a flat coat whose head reminds me of a golden retriever when that head on a flat coat is so distinctive.
Right.
And you don't know that if all you ever look at is flat coats, you don't know that golden retriever. So I think, that's part of it. I think also listening. A lot of people like to talk, but not a lot of people like to listen. And I found, for me, from a learning perspective, sometimes just sitting and listening is much more valuable than feeling the need to weigh in with my perspective. And don't get me wrong, I'm the first one to state my opinion, but
it's my daily struggle, man. Like,
but it is, I think, really meaningful from a learning perspective, is to sit and listen sometimes and take it all in. I just had an experience. I actually just posted it on Facebook because it impressed me. So I was judging shows in Dallas, and there was the Pekingese Club of America had their national.
I am sorry. How is it you were the only person in judges education? That makes me insane.
Well, I was happy. I was thrilled. I had it all to myself.
I understand. But
I get where you're coming from.
I'm just saying, come on, that is just wrong. It's the national, and you are the only person there in a breed that is so distinctive, so specific, so detailed, so in need of people who appreciate those details and the quality. How could you? Speechless.
Well, for me, it just so happened that I go through these moments where I just decide, there's a breed I really want to learn about. And it's more, for me personally, it's not about like adding a breed, I'm going to judge more. It's just, so Pekingese have been a breed that I've always been fascinated by and have talked with people over the years at different points in time. And was very fortunate to have been able to talk with some people who are now gone, who were really icons in the breed. And I just recently was like, I really want to get these. Like, I really want to know them. I want to really, really have a stronger grasp on these. And so I had started communicating with some different breeders, and they've been wonderful with sharing the information. Diane Bell and Tom Crowley from Canada actually sent me Nigel Aubrey-Jones' book on the breed, which is out of print, so you can't really get it. And they gifted me a copy, and they took the time to go through and put Post-it notes in, like as a study guide through the book.
Oh my God,
and
that's amazing.
I love that. And of course, David Fitzpatrick has always been very generous at the shows, because with him, I'll just casually stop by his crates and go like, do you have some dogs with you today? And he'll just pop them all out, and we'll go over them, and he'll talk very honestly about them. So I've had those experiences, and that's really great.
Hey crew, it's Laura, host of Pure Dog Talk. When we started this journey back in 2016, mentorship was our primary mission. And this summer, we're taking another leap forward in that goal. Sign up now for a 1-month free trial of Pure Pep Talk. That's right. Pure Dog Talk's weekly mentoring messages for fanciers on the go are quick, upbeat, actionable tips and tools for your tech box. Your Wednesday text is guaranteed to bring a smile to your face and some pep to your step. We're talking training and grooming, breeding, handling, wisdom, maybe a little bit of wit. For you, from me. Pure Pep Talk is brought to you by Trupanion.
So when I saw this, it's like, I'm going to be in Dallas. They're nationals in Dallas. They had a nice entry, breeder judges. and they had this judge's ed piece. And now I'm going to be honest, I actually had a moment where I'm like, well, I'm not doing this to check off the boxes to apply for this breed. I'm doing this personally, selfishly, just because I want to know them. Like, they walk in my best in show ring and I want to really appreciate a great one. I don't know that I want to do toys or Pekingese as a breed, but I really want to know these just because I like them. And so I almost didn't go to the judge's ed because I felt like I don't want to take time away from this, because that's not really why I'm going. I'll go talk to people on my own, right? But Susan Shepard, who was on the chair, had reached out to me, and it kind of, I think she just assumed, because I bought the lunch box thing, there might have been an assumption like, oh, he's coming for the judge's ed. And then I felt like I didn't want to offend anybody. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to the judge's ed. So Susan sent me an email. I'll meet you in the lobby at 7:30 in the morning. And so off I go. And I'm ready. I'm ready to learn. I was like a kid going off to the first day of school. And so we got there and they had this great PowerPoint, really, really well done. Like direct, succinct, clear, great visuals, very clear on identifying the most important attributes. And they had a photo in there of a cut down Pekingese, so you could actually see. And they had a number of breeders present, and they had 6 dogs available to go over of different ages. And they had a mature bitch who was cut down. So not only did I have the visual from the PowerPoint, but I had this live, really lovely Pekingese bitch who was cut down so that you could, for me, what it does is I work off of a visual template when I think about breeds. And so in a breed like this, right, this coated breed, under which there's so much detail, right? So many important factors that you cannot possibly know, see, or understand unless you can assess it with your hands, right? And so I usually start with the visual in my head. And up until this point, I hadn't seen a cut down Pekingese. So all I still had was I was really starting to grasp the head, but I still wasn't sure of the body and the front construction. So like, I'm just not sure what my hand should be feeling exactly. And this actually helped inform my hands. My visual experience of the cut down dog informed my hands. So then I could then adapt that to, okay, this is what it felt like and looked like. And now when I no longer have the visual input, I still have the tactile input. This is what it should feel like. And having people be able to say, okay, on this dog, feel this, on this dog, feel that, that kind of thing. And they had quality dogs for me to go over. And like I said, there was a puppy, there was an older veteran, and everything in between, dogs and bitches. And then they took them in the ring and they moved them for me, which is another piece. The breed has such a distinct way of going. And I think after this experience, I have a much better appreciation for what correct looks like. I think what I came away was, I think that people often accept something that's not actually the correct role. And so, being able to see it, like the subtle differences between like, oh, that's it, that's not it, that kind of thing. And so I love all that kind of stuff. And then David wasn't exhibiting there, and he was assigned to me as my ringside mentor. So here I am now spending the day watching Pekingese with David Fitzpatrick. I'm like, heaven. Okay, this is totally cool. And he's amazing because he's just so like even keeled and very honest. And he obviously, is passionate about his breed. What I liked is he's very similar to me, is I tend to focus on virtues. I learn better from showing me what is correct, what is right, as opposed to showing me what is wrong. Because I immediately toss that out of my brain because that doesn't help me. I need a template of virtue. I need a template of quality in my mind. And so David, I think, looked at things similarly. Like he talked more about virtues than he did about flaws. So that was really helpful. And he would periodically, he's like, oh, let's go look at that dog. Like a dog would win a class and like, okay, but I need to get my hands on it, right? And so he would go over the dog first, and then I would go. And so it was just this incredible day. And the Pekingese breeders were just so generous with their knowledge. And I got to meet so many of them. And then I actually had the opportunity to watch the breed the next day because my judging, I was done early enough and I caught their breed judging ended and went and watched. It was a much smaller entry than the national, but it, still was like, for me, I kind of used it like a test, like to say, okay, I just did all that. So now let me sit by myself and watch these and see if I see it. And so Susan Shepard, the chairperson, actually sent to the show the next day with one of the breeders 2 Pekingese books for me. Like just gifted me these
God.
beautiful Pekingese books to read and learn. And I'm sitting there ringside. I've got my judge's thing and I got my 2 Pekingese books and I'm sitting watching. And so people kept coming over to me. I'm like, oh, like, are you studying Pekingese? And I'm like, yeah, I am actually. And so it was just this kind of really cool way to start off the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it impacted the way I judged through the weekend because my brain was so like worked up and tuned in and
Detailed.
Yeah, I was very detail focused.
You know what, Don? I think that's so fascinating. Just listening to you, just again, like a kid in a candy store talking about education, right? That is what I would like for the listeners to hear, is the joy in learning for the sheer joy of learning.
Yeah. It's interesting because, your reaction is like, isn't that sad that I was the only one? And yes, I get that because it was a missed opportunity for people. And, I'm sure they can go next year, but this year they missed an opportunity. And that is sad. But selfishly for me, it was like, I'm kind of glad no one else showed up because I might not have had the same experience.
I feel that hard. One of the things that I think, and I think AKC is actually trying to do better at this, but one of the things that I try and do here, and that I think we are seeing more and more of as we go, one of the things that's improving, let's say, in dog shows, is the opportunity for exhibitors to learn too. Like, we as judges should not be the only ones treated to a comparison seminar with Jenny Line going over English Cockers, American Cockers, and Springers and Welsh Springers and, whatever. We shouldn't be the only ones that get that opportunity. Other people should have the chance to learn that or make the chance for themselves, which I think is one of the things I always encourage people to do.
Well, I think a number of specialties are trying to start to move in that direction or have been for a while.
Exhibitor education.
Yeah. And I think it's more often than not billed as breeders education, which I think is unfortunate because then I think, to your point, someone might not see themselves as a breeder right away and could benefit from being there. But I found that people, when they're given the opportunity, they really do eat it up. Like, it's not for lack of desire. I think it's lack of availability to those learning experiences.
And I just saw a social media thing going around that breeders of merit should have to take the same tests that you and I and other judges take on structure, on basic confirmation, which I think is actually kind of genius.
I do think
I totally think it's genius because I've done a lot of judges education. And when I say stifle and they look at me funny, I'm really worried about this.
Yes.
And a lot of, as we all know, a lot of the judges come into the process as breeders, the breeder process of going through judging. And I think, unfortunately, one of the things that we have seen in decline is basic education on structure. Basic animal husbandry, some of those things. I made a whole program about that. But anyway, so talk a little bit about that, ways that listeners can avail themselves. What are your 3 best tips for you, the person who loves to learn? What are your 3 best tips for my people that want to learn stuff?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is you need to know who to learn from.
Oh my God, that is so on point.
That's really key. It's great to have friends, but sometimes your friends are not the ones you can learn from. And you may need to seek out individuals that you don't have a natural connection to, or you don't have a pathway to. So that's number one. I think number 2 is being very clear on what your purpose is. Like, what are you seeking? What is it that you want to get from the learning experience that you're pursuing? Because you want to be sure that you're pursuing the right type of thing. I think it's also important to know yourself as a learner. We all process information differently. We all learn differently. And I know I learn much better visually than I do auditorily. I also know that I learn better by doing it myself with my hands than watching someone else do it. And I mean, it's not that it's the right way. It's just that's how I learn.
Right.
And I think it's important for each person to know themselves as a learner so that the learning experiences they choose meet those needs. Like, do they seek out a situation where they passively sit in an audience and listen to someone lecture? Like, does that work for them? That would not work for me because I don't learn that way. And so looking for situations that are going to play to your needs. So I think those would be the most important places to start, is thinking about who you're going to learn from, thinking about why you want to learn and what you want to learn, and know how you learn.
Oh my God, that is genius. You're a genius. Did I say you're a genius? And this is why I've waited oh so impatiently for 2.5 years for this conversation.
I don't know that I'm a genius. I just have a lot of thoughts banging around in my head. I think they call that crazy.
No, they do not call that crazy. They call that genius. Oh my God. All right. Well, Dawn, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've taken a lot of your day, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time.
Oh, I truly enjoyed this, Laura. Thank you for inviting me. I loved this chat. I hope we get to chat more soon.
Oh my God. That's fabulous.
Yes.